Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode 219 of the Thoughtium Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. I'm Anthony Ewing, CEO, co-founder here at Thoughtium, and I am so excited to be back at the table week over week. Every Thursday at 3 p.m. Central, we bring leadership and leadership topics that matter most to you all. And we go live to our extended community on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. We post shorts to Instagram, and it's all to enrich and incite different thinking for you all who are out there doing the work, focusing on enabling, empowering your people, designing and delivering great experiences, facilitating, managing. It's all a part of the Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. And today, episode 219 has a very acute focus on creating learning journeys that matter. And we have an incredible guest at the table with us today. Shashank Bhushan is joining us. He is the chief talent architect, former chief talent architect at BMC, over 13 years at BMC. He has also played the CHRO role, both globally and here in the United States. And he's also an entrepreneur. And when you mix that entrepreneurial spirit with real world experience, over a decade of real world experience, you get real perspective. And we were really, really excited to have Shashank at the table today with that perspective. So Shashank, good to see you.
Hello, and hello everybody out there. And thank you for the introduction, Anthony. Pleasure to be on your podcast today.
Yeah, I'd say about 70% of our almost 220 episodes are really focused in on how we improve what we would call the employee experience. And the majority of those episodes are really leveraging learning and development as a key dimension or a key component of the overall employee experience. And it sounds like, Shashank, your entire career has almost been really focused on elevating the employee experience with a focus on designing, delivering, developing great learning experiences. So tell us a little bit about you and your background and what you're focused on today.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So primarily, I think I consider myself a business partner. I've always felt it very enriching when I've helped businesses succeed. And part of that success comes through by enriching the lives of those people who really make the business happen, which are the employees for all. And so therefore, my focus right from my early part of the career has always been on making things better from an employee experience perspective. In my mind, the experience that we provide to people while we are hiring them, when we onboard them, when we help them grow, and through their life journey within the organization and afterwards, is something that keeps them engaged with us throughout. And learning and development becomes an extremely vital cog in the wheel to give that sense to people that the organization cares, not just for the business outcomes, but the business outcomes are a natural outcome of their own development.
Yeah, I love that you see learning and development almost as like a mainstay within organizations and even corporate America. At the same time, we recognize that the learning culture within organizations, both small and large, is ever evolving. It's always changing. And so I'm curious, as you kind of look at today's adult learning experience, how are our learning experiences, our programs evolving today? How are they different today than they were maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago?
I think ever since I've been in this function here, changes have been there. Last 4, 5 years have been significant. From the fact that earlier, learning you translate to people as training, and training would then translate to a classroom session. Give or take, right? More often than not. I think the pandemic taught us that everything can happen virtually. And therefore, anytime, anywhere, learning, I think it has been the mantra for us for many years now, for at least 4 or 5 years, getting trainings which are a lot more meaningful from a personal perspective of people. In the good old days, you could design your training calendar for the entire year, publish it out, people would nominate or managers would nominate, they will come into the class, consume it, go back, and that's the end of it. Today, or in the last 4 or 5 years, what we're seeing is people do not just want to walk into a training program. They need to know why are they in there? What are they going to gain out of it? So it's no longer managers telling people that, yeah, this is part of your IDP and therefore you need to go do it. The question then becomes why, and you need to be able to answer that. And therefore, the requirement and absolute necessity of linking it with skill development of what do I need to do, what do I need to learn to be able to grow. And therefore, it has evolved beyond training. It is about experiences, it is about mentorship, it is about coaching that you get, or an opportunity which is a lot more targeted towards career enhancement into a roadmap of what people set out for themselves. So I think that in that sense, it has changed dramatically. And of course, now a lot of that is online as against in-person classroom sessions.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that perspective. This shift from training to learning has been something that we've been focused on for, over 10 years now. But to your point, I think over the last 4 or 5 years, it's been made real, that critical shift of developing training to designing learning environments or learning ecosystems, if you will, has become very real. And I think, part of it has been the acceleration of, technology. I think even, COVID really challenged us to, think in more of a multimodality kind of hybrid type of format. But more than anything, I wonder if it's the tastes and the behaviors and the experience of our learners that have shifted this curve the most. Our learners have different expectations coming into organizations. And we tell our clients all the time that if our employees are not going to be learning the things that they really excited about, that really drive their own personal development within the walls of our organization, they will find another way to get that learning. And there is so much content out there. There's so many platforms out there to engage with that, again, folks will find a way to develop the skills that they're interested in or even the skills that they need. And so I think it's really challenged us as learning organizations to say, hey, we can't just do it the old way. This isn't just a checklist of training. We've really got to understand the needs of the learners, their behaviors, how they come in, some of the tools that they're leveraging. And I'm curious if you have a thought on what has, accelerated this shift from training to learning so much.
I, and you're absolutely right. I think it's also partially to do with the generations at work. It's a lot more focused, a lot more targeted in their own approach of what they want from a learning program itself. And therefore, training is not sufficient. It's a learning journey that becomes that much more important. What am I gaining out of this? Why? And then what do I do next? How do I upgrade myself? The other factor I think it's become is that learning is fairly discretionary from a person's perspective. It is not everybody learns in the same manner. Some people need to have an active facilitator, some would do passively. Like you said, the mediums of dime a dozen. There is so many ways to learn, right from WhatsApp on social media to a LinkedIn Learning or Udemy or other available resources that people have. And therefore, and I think what also happened during the pandemic with people working more and more from homes is people have become a lot more conscious of where are they spending their time. Are they spending the time? You need to make it worthwhile for somebody to spend that time on learning. And I think that has been a huge shift. And not just, and this is not to say it's only for this generation. I think people in my generation also are responding similar. Personally, I'm responding to training. I often ask this: if I'm going into a learning program, why am I doing it? What do I
Yeah.
gain out of it? And then linking it back to the career aspirations has become that much
Yeah.
more important. And
Yeah.
therefore, knowing what skills you have today, what skills you need tomorrow, and then how do you bridge that by way of training, of coaching, or mentoring, or exposure into different areas, rotations that one can do. There are so many other ways to do that.
Yeah, I love that. So, over 13 years as the chief talent architect, you've played the CHR role as well too, and you've led both here in the United States and in India. And I'm curious, as we, so many of our clients and the marketplace at large are building more global organizations. And the downstream effect is that major commercial functions within organizations like L&D are having to think more globally, design and deliver more globally. They've got now multi-center regions that they've got to accommodate. And I'm curious, what are some of the ways that we can think about managing to more of a global structure? when we want to keep the learning personalized?
Right. So, and this is good. This goes back to my experience at BMC, and what we essentially did was we brought in a learning experience platform, which allowed people to self-assess on what skills they have. We plugged in the data, and there's a lot of consultations that goes in. It's not easy to get this data about what is that you need in the future, because it's also a little bit of crystal gauging. You know, what is that you need from a skills perspective, where the business is evolving and so on. But you bring this data side by side, that gives you the delta of what is required to be, added on to the workforce. Some of that will come through talent acquisition from outside, but hopefully more of that will come internally, by learning and by opportunities that develop themselves. I think that has been something that that works very well from a global perspective, because then it takes out the judgment of people locally, rather than just brings everything together, makes it a lot more wholesome from a learning perspective. The other piece also, and I think that has worked very well, is being able to segment the talent. Not everybody learns the same way. Not everybody responds to learn in the same way. Not everybody needs to learn the same way either. It's not about equality. It's about the opportunity that you really have. So bring in additional tools, and that provides you the data and insight to say what stimuli of learning will work for what kind of population, and then be able to customize that, make it a lot more personal, so that people can get onto that and be able to complete and accomplish that. Bear in mind, it's also different when you're doing things on your own, in a remote fashion, to stay focused and motivated to be able to complete. It's almost like having, like on my bookshelf, I've got hundreds of books. I may not have finished all of them. And that also happens to a lot of learning that people start on. It's a lot of excitement to begin with, but you taper off because there are 5 different priorities that
Yeah.
eat at you. So keeping them honest to that, having regular conversations, bringing managers onto it, because they are the most vital cog in the wheel, to keep them, to keep the employees motivated, to get them to feel that this is part of the job. It's not something that they have to do over and above. They're learning. It's something that is so vital for their own development here. So I think those conversations also become that much more important.
Yeah, I love those points. You've got me thinking about 10, 15 years ago, when an organization said, we're going to globalize this learning program. What you would almost immediately do would just be fine. You would find some sort of way to translate the content like that. That's the way that we globalized learning back in the day. And
That's right.
today it's so much more than that, because, and we say this here at Thoughtium, that the content is the commodity, the experience or the learning journey is the differentiator. And I
Absolutely.
think one of the best ways that organizations can think about scaling learning in a multi-center global infrastructure is by standardizing the universal components to a learning experience. Whether you are here in the United States or you're in Singapore, you're in London, you have learners that want to self-identify opportunities to take significant steps in their career. You have folks that potentially want to bring their own content or potentially learn a little bit on their own. And you have the need to bring together people in meaningful ways, whether that's through cohorts or peer coaching.
Correct.
These are all universal modalities, universal components, I should say, to a learning journey, that by the time you fill these out, you've got something very consistent that will work here. It will work in India. It will work in Great Britain. And that's something that is really exciting, I think, about the way that we're globalizing learning, is that it's not just about finding regional content. It's about finding the right learning journey that supports folks across the globe. And that's something that we're really excited about as we see our clients start to move to more of a global model.
Absolutely. And so what has also happened is, because there's so much of connectedness of the learning infrastructure that
Yeah.
organizations are building, for many years, we used to try mentorship or mentoring programs. And I never really saw success of
Mm.
it. It would look very fancy on a PowerPoint, logical as well, but it would not work, because what organizations were trying to do was match people here. It's almost like making a marriage work by
Right.
saying, okay, you're the mentor, you're the mentee, get together now. Now, people don't relate with mentors or mentees in that manner. But when we democratize that, provided the opportunity for people to go find the mentors that they
Mm.
need, we suddenly found there's an uptake of that.
Yeah.
People are now going ahead and finding, because mentorship is no longer a concept which will last for years.
Yeah.
I could find you as a mentor for 2 weeks to
Yeah.
learn how you run this podcast week after week, 220 podcasts or 219 podcasts. How do you do it? And I don't need to spend 6 months with you to learn all of that. Hey, I could learn that in 2 weeks. I can come back to you after 3 months and do another check-in here.
Mm.
And I could have multiple, mentors in that sense. But the fact that we made it, we democratized that, made it available, identified mentors who have special skills onto that. We found that there's suddenly such a large number of people seeking out mentors.
Yeah, I love that. I love that best practice. We're constantly finding ways to connect people, and mentorship has been, a platform that we've leveraged over the years. But this idea of democratizing, mentorship and allowing people to kind of self-identify where they need to go is all a part of, I think, today's new age learning experience. So I appreciate that insight. I want to touch a little bit on this concept of one is greater than zero. I know this is maybe a discussion that you had with Ashley in preparation for this conversation. It's a concept that is so near and dear to my heart. It's the way that, I approach the way that we tell stories and connect with our community. It is not about the numbers. It's about, deep and meaningful value in every touch point we have, whether that's with our clients or whether that's with the community that is tuning in here today. One is greater than zero. We are not looking for the 566s or the 10,000s or the 32,000s. We're looking for the one is greater than zero. And we think that that mentality applies really well and really effectively when you are thinking about designing for learning communities. And I'm curious, Shashank, your thoughts on this concept of one is greater than zero, and how do we scale that?
So this just goes back to some of the practical issues and challenges that you face. You design a program, you roll it out to people, and then you look at the numbers of people who are adopting it and getting onto it. And then suddenly somebody will say, oh, only 45% people signed up. Or of the people signed up, only 70% completed it. And my point was always, like I said, one is better than zero. And this also relates to the conversations about ROI. And this happened several times in executive meetings. I'm sitting in there and somebody's asking, but what is you've spent so much of money on this, what is the ROI of this program? And my answer typically has been, my question is, are we better off with 40% people having learned something that they did not know yesterday? Okay. It's almost like saying, I'm going to be eating well, I'm going to be sleeping well, and I'm going to be working out on a regular basis. The ROI on my health, can you really quantify that to a dollar number? You can't.
Right.
But are you not better off from a health perspective if you're doing all of those three things better, right? Now, the same goes for learning. That whatever you do, even if you do not complete a program, even if not 100% people complete it, even if 50% people do it, it is better than what we had before. And therefore, the efforts to go forward should not stop. We also need to understand this very, very, very well, is that, like I said earlier, people consume learning very differently from each other. So you cannot expect 5 people going through a program, all of 5 of them giving you exact outcomes on that, because they absorb learning differently, just like your bodies react differently to the same diet that two people might be. So which is why, for the last 3-4 years, one is better than zero has been one of my most steady answers to people who keep saying, okay, the numbers are not there. Well, numbers will get there. We have to make sure that the programs that we are rolling out are aligned to what people are looking for. And sometimes there's a learning for us in that, pivot off and do something else, be agile about it.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so much to that. But I think that concept of one is greater than zero for all of us, learning practitioners out there, people leaders, CHROs, that might be an interesting concept to bring to your next executive roundtable or executive conversation, when inevitably they're going to be asking you about ROI. And of course, we have formal models to measure, learning effectiveness, satisfaction data, and things of that nature. But of course, ROI is the holy grail. And I think even just that concept of one is greater than zero, and ensuring that folks know that the efficacy of training can be seen in the impression that it makes, and it doesn't necessarily need to be across the board, is really important to know. So that's I love that, and I think that touches a little bit on maybe some ROI strategy as well too. Shashank, this conversation has been so lively. I get so excited talking about building meaningful learning journeys. I want to round this out a little bit with a quick lightning round, if that's okay, for our community to get to know you a little bit better.
Go for it.
And we'll make it learning specific, because this has been a very kind of learning driven conversation, which I've thoroughly enjoyed. So, Shashank, I want you to think about your childhood. What is an experience in your childhood that you can point back to that says, "Oh, that is why I'm doing what I'm doing here today professionally"?
I think I've been very comfortable with change. I mentioned some earlier that not in this conversation, but I've lived in 14 houses, 5 or 6 cities. Now living in a different continent altogether. So I've been not to say that I love change. Don't get me that. Nobody loves change. But I think I'm comfortable. I'm quite daring enough to say, why not? One of my favorite quotes right from childhood has been a GB Shaw's quote, which says, people look at things and say, why? And I say, why not? So, and I think that has stood in everything that I did from my childhood, playing cricket on the streets, breaking glasses of the neighbors, all of that has been, why not? If you can do something more, go ahead and do it.
I love that. I love that. What's something that you are learning about today, whether it's something you're reading or listening to or involved in, that you're really, really geeking out about, that really has your attention?
So I'm reading a book called Leapfrog, and it so happens it's been written by one of my very closest friends. It's about 6 habits that can transition you and help you leapfrog in life, including building grit and resilience. Because usually boredom gets to us in the routine, but if you're able to get over that, greatness awaits you. So I'm right now reading that, and I find that very, very exciting.
I love that. What's one of the unique ways that you would design a learning journey in India that might be different than the way you would design for here in the United States?
I think for most organizations, um, the Indian offices offer co-location. Uh,
Mm.
what I mean is that people come into the office on a lot more regular basis than they do so in the United States. And therefore, the learning journey needs to be able to take care of that part, that people are physically available.
Mm.
And so uh, personal facilitation should work that much more in an Indian setting. Second, I think the need for being able to relate with each other, the sense of camaraderie that people feel because they are co-located, their friends are there at work, which may or may not be similar in most of the US offices per se. So I think that is something that I would certainly do. But otherwise, um, uh, from a consumption perspective, I think the world has become a lot more global.
Yeah, I love that. Maybe the last question, what's something that, like, maybe a hot take that you have in your space in general? It could be in learning, it could be in talent, it could be in people, where we look forward 5 years from now. How is your marketplace going to be different 5 years from now than it is today? Like, what's one big way that it's going to be totally different?
So think of this today. When we're designing learning journeys, we're doing it in consultation with people, with business and
Yeah.
our client groups, etc. I think a lot of that is going to go away because your chat GPTs of the world are going to do that a lot more efficiently, a lot more quickly. And I'll relate with personal experience of a skills transformation project that I was leading at BMC. We would carve out learning journeys which would take weeks for us to put together for a particular role. But when we start to use technology, right now it's still not there, but sooner than later we will have AIs, and it's not 5 years. I think we're talking about
Yeah.
another year and a half that you will start to see that, and it'll a big part of a role of someone like me would change by virtue of that.
And for those then kind of like knowledge workers, what are some of the things that we should be thinking about as that shift occurs to more outsourcing some of the more automated components of research, insights, learning?
So I think it's important to realize what are things that only humans can do,
Yeah.
which require judgment, which requires discretion, which requires values. Um, b- Before AI catches up to that as well. But I think at the moment that is something that I would really see humans really being able to do that better. But the routine pieces are definitely are already getting automatized, and therefore, you know, it's
Yeah.
interesting time to be in.
Yeah, I love your comment about, but like before AI gets to the value space, which could be inevitable. I can't remember the name, but the platform that Elon rolled out the other day apparently is really impressive and
Grok.
potentially, yeah, and like potentially gets at you know the AI almost being able to generate emotion, which
Emotions,
is
yes, right.
super interesting and a whole another topic. Shashank, thank you so much for stepping in today and joining us at the Thoughtium Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. Clearly you are at the forefront of kind of the learning experience and learning cultures that we are looking to build here within organizations. And we just so appreciate your thought leadership, and we wish you the best of luck in all of your endeavors.
Thank you very much, Anthony, and it's been absolute pleasure to be here with you on this podcast.
Thank you so much. And we will have you back on soon.
Looking forward. Take
Thank you.
care.
All right. That wraps up episode 219 of the Thoughtium Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. We want to thank all of you, particularly our LinkedIn community. I get comments all the time, whether that's in DMs or I'll get a text message, and somebody says, I stopped by last week's episode and it just really provoked some thought, or I've got a couple questions that I want to chat with you about. And that's why we do this week over week. You talk about one is greater than zero. We're not after the massive numbers. We're after offering value on a week by week basis to those people who get excited about enabling and inspiring our employees. And so whether you're stopping by or whether you've got a hot take yourself that you want to share, please feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out directly to me, Anthony@thoughttium.com, or anybody on the team. You can see all of these episodes and future planned episodes at thoughttium.com/live. We go live every Thursday at 3 p.m. Central. And with that, we'll say so long, and we look forward to seeing you next